There is a moment most people never learn to use, the moment after someone disrespects you, after someone tests you, provokes you, says something designed to get a reaction, after someone spreads a rumor, takes credit for your work, betrays your trust, dismisses you publicly. Most people fill that moment immediately, with words, with defense, with anger, with explanation, with the urgent, desperate need to respond, to correct the record, to protect the reputation, to make sure everyone knows they are not to be treated this way. And in doing so, in that rush to react, they hand over the only thing that actually mattered in that moment: their power. Friedrich Nietzsche spent his life studying power. Not the theatrical kind, not the loud kind, the deep, structural kind that determines, beneath all the noise, who actually controls a situation and who is controlled by it. And what he found was this: the most powerful move available to a human being in almost any conflict is the one most people are too afraid to make. Say nothing. Do nothing. Simply ignore. And watch what happens. Today we are going to go all the way into this idea, into the psychology behind it, the philosophy beneath it, the practical reality of what silence and strategic withdrawal actually produce in other people, in situations, in your own life. Stay until the end, because the final lesson is the one that makes all the others make sense. And it might be the most counterintuitive thing you hear this year. 1. Why reaction is the trap. Let's begin where Nietzsche began, with an honest look at what reaction actually is. When someone provokes you and you react, immediately, visibly, emotionally, what have you done? That they found the switch, that they know where to push, that you can be moved, that you can be destabilized by their words, their actions, their presence. In the architecture of power, this is not neutral information. It is an announcement. You've just told everyone watching, including the person who provoked you, exactly how to affect you. You have drawn a map to your vulnerabilities and handed it over freely. Nietzsche understood something about human nature that most people spend their lives refusing to accept. People test each other constantly. Every provocation is, at its core, a question. Can I move this person? Do I have power here? And the answer you give with your reaction, with the raised voice, the defensive explanation, the emotional response, is yes. Yes, you can move me. Yes, you have power here. Yes, I am affected. The moment you react, the test is over, and you have failed it. Not morally, strategically, because the person who cannot be moved, who receives the provocation and returns only silence, only stillness, only the unsettling calm of someone who simply does not require a response, that person has answered the question differently. No, you cannot move me. No, you do not have power here. No, you are not worth the energy of a reaction. And that answer, delivered not in words but in the total absence of them, is the most powerful statement available to a human being. 2. The psychology of being ignored. Here's what most people do not understand about silence. Silence is not passive. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is a force. And when it is applied deliberately, when someone who is fully capable of responding chooses not to, it produces something extraordinary in the person being ignored. It produces discomfort, then confusion, then anxiety, then, if the silence continues long enough, a desperate, almost irrational need to provoke a reaction. Because here is the psychological truth. Nietzsche grasped intuitively, and modern psychology has since confirmed. Human beings can tolerate almost anything except being irrelevant. Anger? We can handle anger. Anger, at least, means we matter enough to upset someone. Argument? We can handle argument. Argument means our words are being engaged. Rejection? Painful, but it at least gives us something to process. A clear answer. But indifference? Genuine, complete, undisturbed indifference? That is unbearable. That is the psychological equivalent of being erased. When you truly ignore someone, not as a performance, not as a game, but as a genuine expression of the fact that their behavior does not warrant your attention, you remove from them the one thing they were seeking: your energy, your reaction, your acknowledgement that they exist in a way that can affect you. And without that, without any of that, they are left alone with whatever they launched at you, unreturned, unacknowledged, sinking back onto them. 3. What Nietzsche understood about silence and strength. Most people associate silence with submission, with the person who didn't have a good comeback, with the one who couldn't defend themselves, with the one who lost. This is exactly backwards. Nietzsche's concept of the sovereign individual, the person who has achieved genuine mastery over themselves, is above all a person who has mastered their responses, not suppressed them, mastered them. There is a crucial difference. The person who is silent because they are afraid, who swallows the response out of fear of conflict, out of anxiety about consequences, out of the desperate need to keep everyone comfortable. That silence is submission. It costs them something. It diminishes them. and they feel it. But the person who is silent because they have evaluated the situation and determined that no response is warranted, who looks at the provocation, assesses it honestly, and decides that engaging with it would be beneath them. That silence is dominance. It costs them nothing. It elevates them, and everyone around them feels it. The difference is internal, but the effects are visible. You can feel the difference between someone who is quiet because they're scared and someone who is quiet because they don't need to speak. One silence is empty, the other is full. Nietzsche was interested only in the second kind, the silence of the person who is so complete, so self-possessed, so certain of their own worth that other people's attempts to destabilize them simply do not land. 4. The slow poison of over-explaining. This is the behavior that destroys more credibility than almost any other. And most people do it constantly, not out of weakness, but out of a belief that clarity will solve the problem. When someone misunderstands you, you explain. When someone judges you unfairly, you defend. When someone spreads a false narrative about you, you correct the record. When someone criticizes your decision, you justify it. When someone questions your character, you provide evidence of your character. And each time you do this, each time you rush to explain yourself to someone who has already decided what they think, you make the situation worse. Not because the explanation is wrong, because of what the explanation communicates before a single word is heard. Explanation communicates. Your opinion of me matters. Explanation communicates. I need you to think well of me. Explanation communicates. I am not comfortable existing in a space where you misunderstand me. Explanation communicates. I can be destabilized by your judgment. And the person who receives that explanation, even if they accept it on the surface, has just learned something about you. They have learned that you can be moved by their disapproval. And once someone knows that, they have leverage over you forever. Nietzsche's counter-instruction is almost violent in its simplicity. Stop explaining, not because you are wrong, not because the truth doesn't matter, but because the person who requires no explanation, who is so certain of who they are that other people's misreadings simply do not require correction, is operating at a level of self-possession that explanation would only undermine. Your life will explain itself. Your actions will explain themselves. Your character, demonstrated consistently over time, will speak in a language no defense could match. Say nothing, do nothing. Let time do what argument never can. 5. What happens in the silence to them. Let's be precise about what strategic silence actually produces, because this is not theory, this is psychology, and it is predictable. When you remove your reaction from someone who provoked you, when you simply continue your life as if the provocation did not reach you, a sequence begins in that person. First, confusion. They expected a reaction, a specific one probably. They had prepared for it. Your silence is not what they planned for. They don't know what to do with it. Then doubt. The absence of your reaction forces them to sit with what they did. Without your response to focus on, without your emotion to feed off of, they are alone with their own behavior. And in that aloneness, questions begin. Was what I did as powerful as I thought? Did it even land? Does this person even care? Then the most important thing, they begin to reveal themselves. Because people who provoke and receive no response almost always escalate. They push harder. They try a different angle. They involve other people. They become louder, more aggressive, more transparent in their attempt to get the reaction they need from you. And in this escalation, in this increasingly desperate bid for your attention, they show everyone watching exactly what they are. Not the composed person making a legitimate point. The person who needs your reaction to feel powerful. The person who cannot function without affecting you. You have become the mirror, and in the reflection, they have shown themselves. All you had to do was nothing. 6. The loneliness of the strong position. This is the part nobody talks about, because silence, strategic, deliberate, powerful silence, is not comfortable. The instinct to respond is ancient and overwhelming. The need to defend your reputation, to correct the record, to make sure people know the truth, these are not weaknesses. They are human, and Nietzsche knew this. He was not asking for something easy. He was asking for something that costs. The cost of silence is this. You must be willing to be misunderstood, sometimes publicly, sometimes by people whose opinion you value, sometimes for a long time. You must be willing to let a false narrative circulate without immediately correcting it. You must be willing to let someone believe a version of events that does not reflect well on you. You must be willing to appear passive when everything in you wants to fight. This is the price, and it is a real price. But Nietzsche would ask you to weigh it against the alternative. The alternative is a life spent in constant reaction, constantly monitoring what people think of you, constantly expending energy defending, explaining, justifying, constantly available to be provoked. constantly allowing other people's behavior to determine your internal state. That life is exhausting, and it never resolves. Because there will always be another provocation, another misreading, another test. And if you have established that you always respond, they will always come. The moment you demonstrate that you cannot be moved, that silence is your default, that reaction must be earned, that your energy is not freely available to whoever decides to provoke you, the tests stop, not immediately, but over time, because there is no point in testing someone who never responds. 7. The difference between ignoring and suppressing. This distinction is critical, and getting it wrong will hurt you. Suppression is what most people do when they try to be the bigger person. They feel the anger, the hurt, the desire to respond, and they push it down, bury it, pretend it isn't there. This is not what Nietzsche is describing, and this is not what produces power. Suppressed reaction does not disappear. It accumulates. It comes out sideways, in bitterness, in passive aggression, in the slow corrosion of relationships, in the inexplicable tension that fills a room between people who have never addressed what happened between them. Suppression is silence as self-harm. It looks like the same behavior from the outside, but feels completely different from the inside, and produces entirely different results. True strategic silence, the Nietzschean kind, begins with something different. It begins with genuine processing, with sitting honestly with what happened, feeling it fully, letting it be real, and then making a conscious, deliberate, empowered decision. Not, I must not respond, but I choose not to respond, because responding would cost me more than it is worth. This is not suppression. This is sovereignty. The first is a cage, the second is a choice, and the internal experience of each is completely different, which is why one produces resentment and the other produces peace.